Joining me now live is Shane Dunlop, the General Manager of Channel 31. Shane, how are you this evening?
Good, thanks, Leonardo. How are you?
Good, thanks. So, what is the latest on the fight to keep Channel 31 on the air? Have there been any new developments?
Well, I mean, we've been in this fight for a long time, and it's hard to know what is a development and what isn't. But as far as it stands right now, we are scheduled to be switched off at the end of the month, June 30th.
Has the Minister for Communications, Paul Fletcher, said anything to you recently about keeping it on air? Because I recall this time last year they went a bit silent, didn't they?
Well, to be honest with you, the minister has never actually directly spoken to any of the community TV stations. We have made several attempts, whether it be here in Melbourne or in Adelaide, to meet with the minister. And over the course of the 2 years or thereabouts that he's been in the portfolio, he's either refused or declined or ignored our meeting requests. So we've actually never spoken directly to the minister. Our dealings have been with the department, and at this point in time, we're not getting much from them.
What would the loss be to production and the community of Channel 31 and indeed Channel 44 over in Adelaide went off air?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a difficult one because we are doing many things. We're a broadcaster. We provide production, services as well as training and pathways for emerging screen practitioners. We do live streams of community events and cultural and religious services, and none of those things are going to be as possible as they are currently if we are switched off free-to-air. Free-to-air provides us with a bedrock of financial support that we get off sponsorship, and that financial support does not exist in the same capacity in digital-only services. It may well for Netflix and Amazon Prime, but for community television, there is not that infrastructure to support the work that we do. And so you're talking about a wide variety. There's a long list of people that directly benefit from the existence of community television, notwithstanding, of course, the people that often get brought up in the defence of community TV, the people who've gone on to be household names, but the thousands upon thousands of people who've gotten their training and worked out the ins and the outs of broadcast TV or just creating content in general have come through community TV. But then, more importantly, over particularly the last 12 months, as we've been dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, community television has really re-emerged as an essential broadcast service in that we've been able to continue to provide access to cultural and religious services and those sorts of things that have been very important to people who've not been able to attend them. And of course, for many older Victorians and older South Australians, the connection to community TV is very strong. The programming, particularly during the daytimes, is very strong. And that's one of the sort of, I guess, key components to why we are very important, is there are very key demographics that rely on us to feel connected and comforted, and particularly over the last 12 months, that's been really important. And it's often overlooked, I think, that the importance that we hold with regards to connectivity for marginalised Australians.
You mentioned digital media there. Now, last year in a media release, you said, quote, "We're looking forward to using the next 12 months to continue to pivot our operations to focus on online broadcasting, and we look forward to working with producers and viewers to ensure that they can still create, distribute, and access community television content for years to come." What's actually been done to achieve those goals?
Yeah, well, so I guess that press release was written before Melbourne went into lockdown number 2, and we've had 2 further lockdowns since then. So we've had a pretty weird year since that press release came out. That being said, we've been working really hard on and this has not been something that we've only just begun in the last 12 months, mind you. Since we were first told that there was going to be some difficult years ahead with regards to our access to free-to-air spectrum. We've been furiously looking at how we diversify what it is that community TV does and how we can get our content out to our audiences. Over the last 12 months, we've been particularly focused on developing our own community TV video on demand service. Now, that's a long road to go down, and particularly when we know, because all community TV stations going back to 2016 received a small amount of funding from the federal government to release a smart app. And so we've got very recent and direct experience in what having an app looks like for community TV. Those apps all cost each station at the time more money to maintain and run than we were able to make in revenue in return to pay for their existence. So we know that whatever service that we develop and release to the public needs to be sustainable and needs to be on our level, needs to be something that community TV viewers can access, can understand, and is not going to cost us an arm and a leg to maintain in the process, because we know that there's not the financial capacity to keep it going. We need any video on demand service to be complementary to our free-to-air signal. That is the only way we can transition viewers and go with the rest of the media industry, because frankly, we're entering the final stages of terrestrial television. The next 10 years will probably be the last 10 years for traditionally broadcast TV. We're not, we don't have our heads in the sand around that. We have to change with the times, and part of that is diversifying our platforms. We have our own video on demand service, which will be launched next week, which is called CTV Plus. And that will be a joint platform where you can see content from both Melbourne and Adelaide, as well as watch both stations' linear broadcasts. And that's something that we look forward to developing in conjunction with our free-to-air signals, because frankly, that's the only way that will be a successful venture.
Are you hoping that Channel 31 will go off free-to-air television at the same time that every other network would?
If you were asking me for what I think should happen, there is, of course, a roadmap that has been announced by the government as part of their media reform green paper, which was released last November. In that document, they outline what the next steps for broadcast TV is, and that includes around 2024 to 2026, there will be a digital restack, a reallocation of spectrum to commercial and public broadcasters. And after that point, I suppose the spectrum that TV uses will be a lot less, and they can make an amount of that spectrum available to 5G or whatever it might be. I would be petitioning whichever government was in charge at that point that there should be a small slice of spectrum reserved for a public community TV service that can continue to broadcast local stories, can continue to do community interest programming, whilst we're seeing things like WIN and regional news disappearing and things being more national. That the amount of spectrum that we currently use is minuscule, and there's certainly space for that in the future phase of broadcast TV. So in an ideal world, community television is allowed to continue for as long as there is terrestrial TV. Do I think it's likely? Probably not. What I do know is that the space that we are currently on, it cannot be used for any other purpose. It can't be sold. It can't be changed, or nothing can be done with it until at least 2024. So, and this is by determination of the federal government's own plans. We know that if we are switched off at the end of this month, that space lies dormant for anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So it's just simply not a sound piece of public policy anyways, regardless of whether or not community TV is allowed to stay on for the next 10 to 15 years. The next 3 should be a minimum.
So would you prefer to see a 3-year extension rather than the 1-year extension as you got at this time last year?
I think that would be a sign of common sense prevailing. That if we were to receive another 12-month extension, certainly I think our producers, our supporters, and our audiences would be happy because it means we're still on the air. But all that does is means that we are finding ourselves here again in a year's time, making the same arguments because they would still be valid. The space is still going to be dormant if switched off any time before 2024, possibly later. So I think that the common sense decision here on the federal government's behalf is to say, okay, we've said as much. The space isn't required until at least 2024. You can have it until then. At that point, I guess, there's a different conversation, but that basically means we don't have to continue to have these conversations every year. It means that community TV can actually get down to business in that process that they want us to go through, which is an entirely, a huge shift from terrestrial TV to digital broadcasting. I guess it's not easy to explain, but we've been going through this for 8 years, and often what people will say to us is, well, you've known since 2014, but you then need to clarify to people who have that, initial point of view, is that that's 8 years of a 6-month extension, a 12-month extension, a 6-month extension, where some of those extensions have occurred within, as you know, 26 hours of a deadline. And I would challenge any business to, one, stay afloat in that kind of environment, and two, do any kind of development and evolution. When you are never sure whether you are going to have more than 6 to 12 months at a time, and you don't find out until sometimes a day before your business is theoretically going to be redundant. So it's a challenge, and I think it'll be nice to get away from having to worry about deadlines and extensions for a period of time that would actually allow us to entirely change, how we do things.
Yeah, just finally, is there anything people can do to support you guys?
Yes, there's of course the things like we've got a petition that is very much active, and there is, I think, close to 10,000 signatures on that, and so people can definitely sign that and share that. Outside of that, and we are getting very close to it, to our deadline, that is. I think outside of that, the one thing I would suggest to people who feel strongly about this is to contact your local member. It's particularly important if your local member happens to be in the coalition, particularly if they happen to be in a marginal seat, and express your concerns around this issue. We know that we have support on all sides of government. We are a politically agnostic broadcaster, perhaps the only politically agnostic broadcaster in the media, the TV media. And so this is not a political issue. We don't want to be taking sides. We're very proud about the fact that we do cater to all political beliefs, and it just so happens that we are asking people to contact their local coalition member and express a concern around what's happening to community TV.
I think there's a bit of a similarity between us in not taking political sides. Really enjoyed speaking with you. Hopefully we don't have to speak this time next year, though, and you can actually get a longer extension. Shane Dunlop, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Leo.